Good evening, and welcome to our first edition of New Millennium Wrestling Interviews. What we try to do here is we try to bring some of the talents that we see here in the ring backstage so that we can have a first-hand look into their minds, and for me to ask them questions so they can express what they have on their minds, and of course, juicy gossip that you might want to hear. And my first guest here tonight, it is my absolute privilege to welcome a legend in professional wrestling, the Seth Cameron. Mr. Cameron, it is a true honor to have you here.
Thank you, Grant. Actually, the honor is mine.
I hope you're doing well here tonight.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I don't want to waste your time very much, so I'll cut to the chase. You're known to be one of the people who really advanced professional wrestling in this medium all those years ago. And so, do you think that, with you being here especially, that New Millennium Wrestling has a chance to change the landscape just as you did, let's say, 5 years ago or so?
You know, I've had people actually ask me this before. And the answer is not as simple as I can just say yes or no. The fact is, professional wrestling has always been an evolving industry. You know, there's a number of people who have innovated from 15, 10, 5 years ago and will continue to do so. You know, New Millennium has a great opportunity right now to thrive and to innovate the entire industry. With or without me. With a lot of the stuff that I'm doing, of course, there comes a lot of innovation that I creatively see. And you can kind of see that with different things that New Millennium has already done. And it's only going to get bigger and better from there. You know, New Millennium is a whole different beast than the company I was in before. You're looking at the factor that New Millennium has more, I would say, more design or, you know, it's not as easy to really answer this question. I could sit here and say yes, I could sit here and say no, but the truth is, we're in an industry that's constantly evolving. It's evolved since back before I was even here. There's a number of people that have helped transition the professional wrestling industry. Am I one of the people? Some people say yes. Some people say no. To me, New Millennium has its own ability to innovate and evolve. It's got a great roster. It's got a lot of great creative behind the scenes, and you know, my name in the mix, or what I bring to the table for New Millennium, is a small piece of the puzzle. It's really ultimately going to be down to what New Millennium does differently. In my opinion, New Millennium has the greatest chance at innovating at, you know, any professional wrestling industry, simply because of everything that it has going for it. The legacy wrestling, the roster. You know, do I bring something to the table with it? Absolutely. You know, the production work that I've done in the past obviously is reflected in what I'm doing in the present. But it's a whole different beast than it was 5 years ago. You know, the company I worked for back then, it was all about thriving. It was all about becoming the number one company out there. And it was successful. But in the same standpoint, there's a lot of blood on my hands for it. There's a lot of things that could have been done differently, but instead, it was done for the company. You know, I'm not going to sit here and make excuses. I'm not going to pretend that there weren't decisions, there weren't obstacles, there weren't bad things that were done. New Millennium has the ability to be beyond that, because New Millennium has people that are experienced within the industry. And you've got people that know just how far to draw the line and just how far to cross it. You know, sometimes innovation requires things that you wouldn't morally find right. And honestly, I have been in that position. So, when it comes down to it, will New Millennium actually have the ability to be innovative? Absolutely. Will it be at a cost to other people? Absolutely not. But in the same standpoint, New Millennium has a lot of positives that make it one of the few companies that's out there that can actually innovate the next 5, 10, however many years until the next people come along to innovate.
Well, you know, I'm afraid that I'm going to have to start getting to the nitty-gritty here. As much as I'd love to hear more about New Millennium Wrestling, I know what people want to ask you, so therefore I have to ask you these things. And we know who I'm talking about. Derrick Zane. But before we get to that, really, I want to know, what were your thoughts on Derrick Zane before this mess began?
You know, it's an interesting question, and it's one I'll be very honest about. You know, back years ago, when I was at the prime of my career, I had heard of Derrick Zane, didn't really know much about him, never really met him in person. Back then, a guy like Derrick Zane, I really wouldn't have given two thoughts about. Not because the guy's not talented, not because he doesn't deserve it, but just because back then, to me, a guy like him just didn't speak to me. It was beneath me. Nowadays, I realize that I was wrong. A guy like Derrick Zane is a guy that not only has pure potential and raw talent, but a guy like Derrick Zane has the ability to be an unstoppable force. Nowadays, I see a guy that gets into the middle of that ring and he goes up against opponents as if they're basically throwaway toys. He's got power. He's got skill. You know, I started noticing him back a couple years ago, after I was out of everything. You know, I finally hit the point in my career where I decided to hang up my boots and put away my tights, and I started noticing things that I had never noticed before. And he was one of those people that I actually started noticing. You know, until this point, I've had nothing but respect for Derrick. He's a talent that I guess you could say I mistook. I, didn't give the time of day. And he's got my attention. Especially now.
It's pretty obvious. He especially has the next to grind with you, by the looks of it. And you made it very clear that you're retired, you're not doing this anymore, and you just rather stay on the sidelines and just watch the show or help in its production. But in terms of actual competition, this is not something that you want to get into. Though, unfortunately, he doesn't seem to be taking no for an answer. I mean, we see him, as far as I'm concerned, he's lost his mind. And we've seen him time after time taking out his frustrations on the roster. They don't stand a chance against him, unfortunately, because he's has no more rules that he goes by, which our other talents do. So why? It seems like you're the only person who really can stop this by giving him what he wants. So, and we know what he wants. He wants you to accept his challenge. He's made that painfully clear. So why don't you finally decide to accept and then just allow New Millennium Wrestling to continue back to its normal business?
You know, if I accepted every single person out there on a challenge that they had made, there would be a line that would be going all the way to the Swole Center right now. You know, I came out and I felt I had to do something, and that was to introduce myself to the New Millennium crowd and to, in a lot of ways, apologize to a lot of the people that I have offended and that I've hurt, especially through my past, because to me this is a new start. You know, I did retire. As I said before, I hung my boots up, I put my tights away. I made a collective decision to step out of professional wrestling because of a lot of the things that I went through. You know, I've suffered more injuries than I could probably count on one hand. I have been through an illustrious career, but it's also been a very damaging career. I've got a very bad knee that I've had multiple surgeries on. The last match that I took place in, I had internal bleeding. I've been through the ringer. I made the collective decision to retire and not step back into the ring because, to me, it felt like it was the right thing to do. Derrick Zane comes out, demands an apology from me. I don't mind giving him an apology because I felt he's one of the few people that actually deserved an apology. There's a lot of people that deserve one, but if I can give one to him face to face, then more power to the factor of hopefully some kind of redemption. He proceeds to clock me, lay me out in the ring. Fine, I get it. You've got a beef with me. I don't take it personal, necessarily. It's the heat of the moment. I go backstage, I do my thing like I always do, and the next week he calls me out and he accepts my apology and throws this challenge down on me. And he can't take the fact that I'm retired. You know, whatever his problems are with me, I apologized for. I don't see any need to further it with a match. But to sit there and slap me afterwards, 5 years ago, I would have turned around and I would have laid him out. But I'm not that person anymore. I'm not going to sit there and I'm not going to start something that trivial. So I turned around and I walked away. Ever since then, everybody's been asking, why don't you accept his challenge? I'm retired. I'm out. I don't see any real reason that I need to go back in for one match, even if he is as upset with me as a person can get. There's just no need for it. There's absolutely no good that would come out of a match. I've made my apology, and I guess he just doesn't accept it.
Okay. I don't know if you're aware, but recently there was an interview by a fellow by the name of Bruce Caton, I believe, who interviewed Derrick Zane. it was fairly brief, but fairly informative. And according to Derrick Zane, I'm paraphrasing here, this is not verbatim, basically claiming that you don't give, the way he said it, you don't give a damn about the health and the well-being of the NMW roster. And since you still refuse to rise up to the challenge, he will, in quotes, turn up the heat. I don't know if you want to respond to that somehow.
You know, the last few weeks he's come out and he's attacked a number of NMW wrestlers. He's all but basically destroyed them. And he wants to say that it's my fault because I'm not accepting his challenge that these people are getting harmed. Is it my responsibility? Maybe. You know, because of me saying no to him, he's going out and he's attacking people. Am I responsible for that? Yeah, possibly. Possibly I'm responsible for him going out and attacking other people. But the thing is, I'm not going out and attacking people. Derrick Zane is the one going out and attacking people. All because he wants what he wants. He wants a match against me. So, if he wants to throw the blame down on me, that's fine. Do I care about the people in the backstage? Absolutely I do. The staff, the roster, every single one of them. But Grant, there's a point where the attitude is that I have to accept his challenge and face him in the middle of the ring in order for him to stop. And that's just not going to happen. Not because of me not accepting the challenge, but just because he wants to get what he wants. And he'll continue to do it regardless of anybody that accepts what he wants. Derrick Zane is ruthless. He's going to continue to attack people until I finally give in. But I'm not giving in. When I hung up my boots, I told myself I would never step back into another ring again. For my own well-being. And because the guy that stepped into the ring is not really a guy I want to see come back. If he thinks he's going to turn up the heat, then let him. Let's see what he has in store this week. And let's see just how far he's going to cross the line. Because he's already crossed the line with a number of people. You know, this is not on my head. This is Derrick Zane doing this stuff. I might be the cause of it, but I'm not the person doing it.
That's fair enough. Like, you know, keep in mind, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, and this is just something that I have to do. You know, the crowd wants me to ask you these questions, so therefore I have to ask you them myself. So, but enough about Derrick Zane. You know, I think we've had a mouthful already, and only time will tell what's going to happen. And so, I totally understand where you're coming from. I can't say I blame you. In your shoes, I'd probably be running away screaming. So, yeah, I can't judge you at all. But, you know, let's just go away from that, and let's take a turn for something a little more uplifting. So, as we all know, New Millennium Wrestling is in its infancy, and it's growing pretty fast. So, eventually, we're going to have to start crowning champions. And I just have to ask you the question, you know, do you have any early picks for title holders? You know, scratch your head on that?
You know, that's actually a pretty good question. I've never really thought about it. You know, we've got so many incredible talents within this company that it's at this point it's anybody's game. You know, if I could probably throw a couple names out there, You've got Maven Gottlieb, who has been on fire over the last few weeks, and he has been incredibly impressive. His match with David Hawk, DHA, it was phenomenal. I was absolutely surprised. There's a lot of other good guys. I mean, DHA is another good name. He could go a long way. He's known for being one of the best in professional wrestling. So it's very likely that he could end up taking it all. There's a lot of factors that come into who's going to be the next champion, who's going to be the champion of NMW. At this point, I think it's just too early to tell. I think there's so many great names that are competing, and once the championships go into the picture in New Millennium, it's just going to become even bigger.
Well, that's fair enough. That's a fair answer. So, well, that's about all the time we have here for this session. So, Mr. Cameron, I'd like to thank you again for taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk with us. I'm sure you have a lot to do, so we're not going to take up any more of your time.
Thank you, Grant. And it's, I want to just say it's been a real privilege to actually sit at the table with you the few times that I have. Keep up the great work.
Yeah, you're very kind. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that about wraps it up for this week's edition of New Millennium Wrestling Interviews, and keep up to date for any other subsequent interviews we're going to have. But until then, I've been Grant Longstreet. My guest has been the legendary Seth Cameron. So until then, take care, folks.